Dr. Dorothy J. Maver is an educator and peace builder whose keynote is inspiring cooperation on behalf of the common good. Dot is president of the National Peace Academy of the United States and is founder and serves on the Leadership Council for the Global Alliance for Ministries and Departments of Peace. She has taught at both the high school and university levels, including Norwich University, the oldest private military academy in the United States. Her shared responsibility and shared leadership model has been used in sports, politics, education, and grassroots organization. In the world of fast-pitch softball, Dr. Dot is known for her revolutionary fast-pitch hitting technique, the Maver Method, Secrets of Hitting Success. She is co-author of the book Conscious Education, The Bridge to Freedom, and is a keynote speaker and workshop facilitator at conferences worldwide. Before Ms. Maver comes to stage, I'd like to talk a little bit about her National Peace Academy. It's in its third year here in the United States and is headquartered in Shelburne, Vermont, with an education office at Adelphi University in New York. It supports, advances, and nurtures cultures of peace by preparing the next generation of peace builders who will bring their unique background to communities and the corporate, nonprofit, and government workplace. The National Peace Academy learning programs support the development of full spectrum of the peace builder, inner and outer, personal and professional, and facilitates the development of peace systems to locally and globally. Please help me in welcoming Dorothy Maver.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mother. Thank you, Claire. Thank you. You're most kind, and may we hit a home run this evening. It is always such a joy, and I want to say thank you. And Pat, thank you. I understand that it's rare at the university level to have a director as involved and effective as you are. I hear that from the students here, so bless you. Thank you. I also want to thank everyone who has made it possible, and at Iowa State University, and Nadia and Claire, congratulations on the program, and congratulations on the turnout. Well done. So, as far as hosting moi this week, I also want to thank all of you. Many of you are here tonight who have helped to make it possible for me to be here, and I'm deeply appreciative. And in fact, perhaps you're familiar with the Banner of Peace, designed by Nicholas Roerich, a painter who has painted over 7,000 paintings. The Circle of Humanity, meaning one human family. And when we learn to acknowledge and appreciate the arts, science, and religions of one another throughout the world, we will indeed live in Pax Cultura, a culture of peace. So it has a deep meaning to me, this Banner of Peace, and I think it also does to 11 Days of Global Unity, the Central Iowa team. You know, 11 Days starts on September 11th and runs through the 21st of September, which is the International Day of Peace, the UN International Day of Peace. And the 11 days are to inspire, inform, and involve. And this team, do you mind just standing for a moment, please? This team is doing a remarkable job in Ames, Iowa. And so I would like to take just a moment and share one more thought. And as I do, I'm going to, I was at the opening dinner the other night with the team, and they were sharing the many, many events during these 11 days here in Ames. And of course, they are part of a greater team that has a ripple effect, like dropping a pebble in a pond, of teams all over the country and all over the world around 11 days. So I'd like to ask Heather to step up just for one moment, because I want to gift Heather. When I asked at the dinner, so how did this 11 days team come together? All fingers pointed in that direction. And you probably know Heather Withers, and I'm going to, you're getting ready to say something, I can tell.
I'm going to do a commercial if I may.
You are? Pat? Okay. So, just making sure. But the reason I asked you up here is I want to gift you with a Banner of Peace pin and recognize your peace-building efforts.
Well, this definitely should be shared with all of our team because we're small but mighty, and with all of you. So thank you.
Okay, and you have 1 minute because...
I know. The 1 minute I'm going to tell you is please go to the table. Dorothy is doing something tomorrow in Boone, tells you about it here, coming back to speak with teenagers in the evening. Something you can take with you, bookmarks of what's going on in 11 Days of Global Unity, and a partial listing, because we're getting more events all the time, of what's going on. So please take them from the table.
And there's an event on the 14th sponsored by the Niagara Foundation.
And they
as well.
have an invitation.
Thank you. And thank you for your peace-building efforts. In 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was joined by members of his administration at the time, including Henry Wallace, Secretary of Agriculture, who was actually signing something called the Rorke Pact. It's still in our State Department, and it's something worth researching for those of you who are involved on the student level here at the university. Can you imagine a banner of peace flying the way the Red Cross flies? And this banner of peace, and 29 countries, by the way, signed this declaration called the Rorke Pact, to fly in times of peace and war over education, institutions, libraries, museums, etc., to protect the culture, and more than that, honor the culture at all times. I'm going to suggest this evening that we hold together, that it is culture that actually unites us in deep relationship. And as we connect heart to heart this evening, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever will. It's this team, it's this group, it's the students. I just had the delight to meet some of you. It's Nadia and Claire. It's all of us working together to make that difference. Do you know this song? I'm going to invite you to sing it with me, if you will. You know, music is such a universal language, and every place I've been in Ames so far, we've sung. Is that unusual, or is that usual for Ames, Iowa? I love Ames, Iowa. I love to sing. I love music. And at the end of the 1990s, not yet Secretary of State Hillary Clinton traveled to Beijing. And while she was in Beijing, Libby Roderick has written this song, How Could Anyone? And it was sung by all of the women at the International Women's Conference in Beijing. Very moving. Looking at one another, honoring the heart-to-heart connection, and recognizing, how could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. There's a story being told on the planet. It's all about harmony through conflict. Do you think, do you feel, do you believe, do you act as if it's possible to resolve conflict prior to the escalation to violence? It's not a rhetorical question, so maybe even a head nod. Do you think it's possible to resolve conflict prior to the escalation to violence? Yes. I have to say that sometimes when I ask that question, some people say, you know, I'm not really sure. And then my partay is, you know, we've gotten confused in our culture between conflict and violence. There's a difference. Violence is not inevitable. Conflict may be inevitable at this point along the human journey, but violence is not. And indeed, we can learn. We can educate ourselves. And it's education that shapes society, not just through our public schools, although that's a great forum for education, but through our churches, through our aunties and uncles, through our neighborhoods. And we are starting to wake up once again to the necessity and the beauty And I intentionally use that word because we have forgotten about that a little bit along the way. The path of beauty. The beauty of community. And of really caring about one another in community. So the essence for us at the National Peace Academy, and for the work that I am so privileged and blessed to be able to do worldwide with so many colleagues in the peace-building field that is just really becoming visible, is right human relationship. And I am often, and you can imagine sometimes, group work, it's easy, right? It's like, oh, it's so exciting when you get the idea, and then you all get together, and it's like forming, storming. Anyway, so, norming, but now I think we're getting to the place of performing. So right human relationship, and almost every day, at least once, I'll say, another study in the science of right human relationship. Good on us. Very challenging. And it isn't enough to wish that we could do better or communicate with one another. We actually need to begin to develop those tools and those educational courses and experiences for nonviolent communication, for peer mediation, for conflict resolution, for restorative practices. I could go on and on. You know all of this here in Ames, Iowa, and I know you do because looking at a lot of the things that are happening, you're doing good work in Ames. I have only to go to Ballard High School and realize that. So it has to do with storytelling. How many of you enjoy storytelling? And almost every hand goes up, and especially as kids, right? And then what has happened in our culture? Sometimes we forget. We grow up and it's, oh, that's a little silly or that's whatever. We love stories. We ourselves are a story. In the Mideast right now, and many of you I'm sure are aware of this, particularly the students here at the university, the Palestine and Israeli youth get together all the time. And there are many groups now forming, and not just in the Mideast, all over the planet, of youth who are recognizing, and it's stated very clearly by the youth heroes of peace from Israel and Palestine who say, and the last September 21st International Day of Peace, I got to moderate a panel where some of them were honored, and they make it very clear, we need a different future. I mean, it's a little painful out here right now. We need a different future. But to have a different future, we need a different story. My friends, we are the storytellers. What is your story, and how are you telling it? And it has to do with thoughts, word, and deed. So I want to share with you a friend of mine who travels with me everywhere, the Wombat. Perhaps you're familiar with the Wombat?
Yo, listen up. This is your home. It's the only one you got. This place is pretty, but you can't live there. You can't even get there. So I repeat, this is your home. It's the only one you got. Cherish it, protect it. It's the only one you're going to get. These guys, they're your neighbors. They ain't going away. They ain't leaving. You have to get along with them. So you have to learn to share. You have to get along. You have to learn to get along because they are your neighbors. They're not going away. Okay, all this stuff, the animals, the waters, the sky, the ground, the bugs, the fish, the tacos, the people, they're all connected. Everything is connected. They all depend on one another. If you ignore that, you're doomed. Repeat, doomed, okay? So listen up. It's all one. Not two worlds, not three, one. Just one. So get it in gear. Remember, all is one, okay? Hit it.
Okay, let me bring this back up. Yeah, yes. And the game changer, we are recognizing, we're acknowledging we are interconnected. And when we really get it, when I get it that I'm interconnected with all of you, it's going to be much harder for me to do something that is harmful, that harms you. And that's happening all over the world right now. So how the story's unfolding, and this is through one small lens, which is mine. And thank you again for the opportunity to share. I always feel such a sense of joyous responsibility being up in front of a group like this. We're at a threshold moment. It's a tremendous time of transition on the planet, and I don't think I have to name all of that. It's pretty obvious. Economics and, really, food, shelter, water, name it and claim it, right? Jobs, we could go on and on. It's a real time of transition. And we're very polarized, not just in this country, but around the world, in what we believe in and what's right and what's wrong, et cetera, and how to move forward. You know, it makes me think of the Dark Ages. Can you imagine in the Dark Ages what it must have been like? If we were a group, we probably wouldn't have any lights. Well, there wouldn't be lights except candles, but we'd be afraid to be seen, to gather, to speak like this and read and be culturally creative. Could we have imagined at that time that we were 1, 2, maybe 3 steps away from a renaissance of color and sound and beauty that the world had not seen yet? I think we're at such a threshold in the human journey. I think we are actually at the beginning of a renaissance and we haven't yet recognized it. I mean, think about it. Even just in the music. Are you familiar with the Plain White T's? The song of the moment with the Plain White, my favorite song of the moment, right? Swing to the rhythm of love. Go figure. That's what our teens are listening to, many of them right now. That's a little different than Tonight's the Night. Let's party. And I love that song. I love rap. I love that song. Some rappers are some of my best buds. And what we are recognizing through conscious rap, included, is that there's a great awakening happening among all of us. And are you familiar with Blessed Unrest and Paul Hawkins? I love Paul Hawkins. He speaks about interconnectedness, and he says the word's a little overused. And it is. It's like, oh, yeah, we're all interconnected. And so how's that working for us? I grew up in New Jersey. Every once in a while, it just comes out. So what he says is, let's talk about intertwinkling, which I love. It makes you think, and it takes me up into the heavens. And those stars rarely are on collision courses. I mean, truly, rarely. And they really have this rhythm, this dance kind of down, and the whole thing. So we are not living in a time when there's going to be one person who's going to solve it, where there's going to be one visionary leader whose job it is to make it all better. We are actually living in a time where thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals and groups are doing their thing and making a difference. It's not being reported out yet fully enough. We're still really focused through the lens often of negativity and violence reporting. But the truth is, we're in the midst of a leaderless movement. We are all our own CEOs, and we are all leaders in our own right. So when we talk about infrastructures for peace, we're actually talking about developing, creating institutions and organizations and groups that are created from within an emerging or emergent worldview. And I'll just take a moment and my perspective on this. I mean, we've gotten so good as humanity. And I'll speak about the U.S. right now. The U.S. is really good at doing the corporate thing, really good at individualization and self-interest, really good at containment and isolation, really good at research, more and more research about just one thing, really good about me being strong and filled with the need to get my needs met and getting my needs met. Some separation, some competition. There is nothing wrong with all of that. It's been a good thing over many, many, many decades, even hundreds of years, but its use-by date is up now. What's emerging naturally, and we're seeing it with many of our children, and there's some great education studies coming out, particularly with preschoolers, is that the emerging worldview is all about synthesis and cooperation and group work and recognizing that I give my gift on behalf of the greater good and my needs are met within that and I don't lose myself in that. But it's still very challenging because we haven't seen those institutions. It's how we're striving to develop a National Peace Academy in the United States of America. So those principles, we are defining those principles. Now, if you have milk in a refrigerator, milk's good, right? We like milk, most of us. It's good. If it's in the refrigerator for like 6 weeks, we're probably not bloop, bloop, not going to pour the milk and drink it. It doesn't make milk bad. That use-by date is up on that milk. So we're not going to drink that milk, but it doesn't make milk bad. So is it possible that we can joyfully cross this threshold into this time that we are living in and recognize that we are in a chrysalis experience, a great opportunity? You know, you don't have to beat up on the caterpillar for it to become a butterfly, but you do have to have enough imaginal cells. Think of it, if every one of us is an imaginal cell in humanity, how many imaginal cells will it take to actually willingly be visionary leaders who see a better future and are willing to begin to change themselves and work to transform communities to demonstrate that? And again, I point to Ballard in education. Nicholas Rourke, I mentioned earlier, a painter, and we do not fear. At the heart of a culture of violence is not so much loving understanding and tolerance, but fear. And as we watch the artwork that's starting to come to the fore, and with our young people as well, it is more and more and more about peace, about right relationship, about love. Are you familiar with Generation Waking Up? I'm asking the students primarily. This is hot off the press, about a week ago, what I'm going to show you. It's about a 3-minute clip. Generation Waking Up. Who are we as a generation? And this is all on their website. But who are we as a generation? What are the unique challenges and opportunities that we face? Where are we in the world today? What is the state of the world that we are inheriting? What has to change? How can we transform our worldview to create a new possible future? What do we do now? How can we each in our own unique way contribute to a thriving, just, sustainable world? And having just barely met some of you, I know that you are asking these questions as well. So Steve, thank you for walking me through this earlier, wherever Steve is. And
I'm Esteban.
I'm Valerie.
We're part of Generation Waking Up.
And we're here to tell the story of our generation.
We have grown up in crisis, environmental, social, spiritual crisis.
The story of our generation is a generation that was born into deep political corruption, deep social injustice.
I grew up around a lot of violence and a lot of poverty. I also grew up around a lot of privilege and a lot of wealth. It was always really clear to me that both sides were unhappy.
What parts of the world or the country are going to be underwater a few decades from now? I don't know of any other generation before us that's had to really think about that.
We are at a cusp. We are at an edge, at a boundary, at a cliff. The story of our generation is to either fall or fly.
I saw a vision of young people around the world rising up together, joining forces together to bring forth a thriving, just, sustainable world.
We're using the story of our generation to wake up youth around the world. Wake up to the challenges of our generation. Wake up to the opportunities. And wake up to the fact that we're all in this together to create the kind of world we want to live in.
Generation Waking Up is developing a tool to enable and empower our generation to face the challenges of the world today.
This tool, the Wake Up Experience, is an interactive, multimedia workshop that engages young people in the critical questions of today. Who are we as a generation? Where are we? What is the state of the world that we're inheriting? What has to change to create something new? And then what do we do now?
It uses music, videos, games, and conversation to explore the state of our environment, social justice, and personal well-being. And it provides an empowering context to ignite action.
The Wake Up has been shared with thousands of participants in high school classrooms, assemblies, colleges, and at youth and student conferences. It has inspired young people to initiate service projects and days of action on their campuses and in their communities.
Since the Wake Up, I've been fully involved in my community, working on community projects such as community gardens, planting my own garden. I've just really dove into community work and find myself connecting with my deepest passion and connecting with others who are also sharing that space of manifesting their heart's desires for not only themselves, but for their community and for the world.
But the Wake Up is in its first stage of development, and we want to take it to the next level, and this is how you can help us make it happen.
By donating to this campaign, you'll be helping to create a new version of the Wake Up, with videos that highlight young artists, activists, and entrepreneurs, with a cutting-edge new soundtrack, graphics, and narration that speaks powerfully to our generation.
This tool is open source, it's adaptable, translatable, multicultural.
When we're done with it, you can take it, adapt it, and use it to catalyze inspired action in your community.
What does it take to create the change we really need to have as a human species evolving on this planet? And the answer came to me in kind of an equation. Information plus inspiration equals action, which equals change. This model is helping create that space for all those pieces to come together that's necessary for creating this change for a world where all of us thrive.
The more people who have access to this lens of what's unfolding in the world and to the possibility of our collaboration together as young people, the greater the likelihood that we will indeed wake up our planet at large and build a new world together.
We are writing a different story than the one we've been led to believe is inevitable.
Let's make it happen and
as we take that in, is that not hopeful? Is that not hopeful? And this was sent out last week. And Shireen, the young woman you saw 2 or 3 times, she's the director of the Mosaic Project in Oakland, California. She's a powerhouse. And any of the young people, if I started to tell you about their backgrounds and what's happening on this planet, and I know many of you are involved as well. And if civilization is to survive, we must cultivate the science of human relationship, the ability of all peoples of all kinds to live together and work together in the same world at peace. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I mean, we've known all of this for a very long time. And how do we do this? So at the Peace Academy, we said it's great to educate for peace, but what's peace? How do we define peace? Because unless we can define it, and within an academic setting, it's very challenging. So we are using the Earth Charter definition. Peace is the wholeness created by right relationships with oneself, other persons, other cultures, other life, Earth, and the larger whole of which all are a part. Simply put, peace is living in right relationship with self, others, and the world around us. Ambassador Anwar Chowdhury, maybe some of you are familiar with Ambassador Chowdhury. He's been at the United Nations for many years. He was formerly from Bangladesh, the ambassador from Bangladesh. He's responsible for the Decade for a Culture of Peace and Nonviolence on behalf of the children of the world. He's a great proponent of women at the center of peace. And if you're not familiar with UN Security Council Resolution 1325, I encourage you to check it out. Women's voice at the table in terms of decision making and at the center of peace. And he is asking the big question. And it's being asked now at the United Nations. It's being asked by many groups around the world, particularly in Spain, in Barcelona. The big question is peace a human right? Now, that may not seem like such a big question, but every single time humanity has asked a big question, some great shift, some great transformation has happened. Example, and we could use just the U.S. What do you think? Is it a good idea that women have the vote? But there was a time when I would not be up here talking, and women in this audience would not have been able to vote. Another one. What about an abolitionist movement? What about slavery? And all of us, we have our own thoughts and feelings about all of this. And if you've watched some of the movies and if you've studied some of this, it's not a quick fix when a big question is answered. Civil rights is still ongoing. It's not a quick fix. But we are asking the question, is peace a human right? What does that say? Think about it. Cast out 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. I think sometimes I may not see it in my lifetime, but darn it, We are going to see it. And there will be someone standing at a World Affairs series sharing, and those who you will pass the baton to, Claire and Needy, will be up here introducing, and they'll say, you know, there was a time when peace did not prevail, and in fact, we went to war with one another. Let's invite Wendell Berry into the room. What we need is here. Geese appear high over us, pass, and the sky closes. Abandon, as in love or sleep, holds them to their way. Clear, in the ancient faith, what we need is here. And we pray, not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in heart and in eye, clear. What we need is here. I live in Vermont, in Burlington, Vermont. Right now it's a bit challenging in Vermont. The beauty of Vermont is stunning, and there's always a weekend in October, usually the 1st or 2nd, and on a Saturday morning you walk up to the high point of the hill by the University of Vermont, and you can see to the east the Green Mountains, Vermont, and you can see to the west the Adirondacks over Lake Champlain, and here come the geese. Flocks and flocks of geese. It takes me to my knees every year. What we need is here. In 2008, a group of us decided, following in the footsteps of, well, it started all the way back with our founding fathers, actually, who some of them were calling for a peace academy even at that time. But all the way through to during the Carter administration, when the Matsunaga Commission was Senator Matsunaga from Hawaii, and Elise Boulding and others traveled this country and asked the question, do we need a National Peace Academy? So in 2008, actually President Reagan in 1984 signed in the United States Institute of Peace, which is still in existence as an arm of the State Department, works primarily internationally. So when we talk about institutions, most of the institutions that have to do with peace right now, or any kind of peace work, have still been created within the systems thinking that we were talking about before, whose use-by date is up. So what we are striving to do is create an institution that is at once cooperative. We're working with and through existing universities, colleges, learning institutions. We are striving to embody and reflect the principles and processes of peace, knowing that it starts with us. It has been a little too easy to come up with a good idea and then say, here's what you should be doing. And it's time for all of us to take that shared responsibility. So supporting, advancing, and nurturing cultures of peace, preparing the next generation of peace builders who will bring their unique background to communities and the corporate, nonprofit, and government workplace. And thanks for sharing that up front, Claire. Sometimes when it's said twice, it really sinks in. This is at the first time at the national level in the United States of America that this kind of connective tissue is out there, making visible what's already happening. And you know this. I mean, right here in Iowa, forgive me. I was just in Ohio, actually, with the September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. You may know Bev and John Titus, if they've been on the national news as well. They lost their daughter when in the plane that hit the South Tower. And I traveled with them all last week and spoke at various events. So they are obviously still on my mind. And when I think about this, because their message right now, through their pain, and on 9/11 after 10 years, and they would say, and through all of this, we recognize that it can't be about revenge, and it can't be about more war or killing, and that's why Dot's here. So then she's going to speak about a culture of peace and educating for peace, because education actually is the key. And the truth is, educare, drawing forth, leading out, is the key. It's in each one of us. And that's what we need to do, is help us, inner and outer, personal and professional, to actually be the ones who develop the peace systems local to global. So that's what we're doing. We're taking a multi-stakeholder approach. We used appreciative inquiry to develop an emergent design process. We had a visioning summit at Case Western Reserve University, and then we had a design summit at Case Western Reserve as well with 200 people to design a shared responsibility, shared leadership model, and we've got offices all over the country, but no brick and mortar. So it's an experiment. We shall see. And Betty Reardon, one of the founders, along with Elise Boulding, and Elise Boulding is considered the mother of peace research. Betty Reardon is considered the mother of peace education. The general purpose of peace education, as I understand it, is to promote the development of authentic planetary consciousness that will enable us to function as global citizens and to transform the present human condition by changing social structures and the patterns of thought that have created it. This transformational imperative must be at the center of peace education. And just for one moment, change, transformation. There's a difference. Change, if we decide to change the light bulbs, that's great, and we can even get more energy efficient light bulbs in here. If we really want to transform this, and this is the true roof or ceiling, we're going to cut some skylights in the ceiling, and that's truly transforming. So we are educating through 5 spheres of peace learning: personal, social, institutional, political, and ecological, taking a holistic purview. And these are our programs: International Institute on Peace Education, a certificate program, Peace Building, Peace Learning, intensive global campaign for peace education, and a teleconference series that Ambassador Chowdhury kicked off. And I go into just a little bit of detail because we're not the only ones doing this. There's a Peace Academy in Costa Rica, there's Patria in Romania, there's the Peace Building Institute in Canada, there's John Paul Lederach and Manish Thapa about to announce a Kathmandu Peace Academy, and I could go on. Is that not exciting? I could go on at this point, but this is not getting reported out. So if any of you are peace journalists, please start telling the story. The Global Alliance for Ministries and Departments of Peace, actually in 2 weeks there will be a South Africa summit in Cape Town, the theme of which is Ubuntu in action. In 2005 in London, about 40 of us got together representing 12 countries and founded this Global Alliance. And at the time, there wasn't an infrastructure for peace called such as a ministry or department of peace. And now, after all these summits and all this work, the Dalai Lama is in support, happy to give my support to such a body, whose responsibilities would include being a consistent voice for nonviolent means of settling disputes. Desmond Tutu, go for it, and one day we'll ask, why were we so stupid for so long because of something so obvious? And Archbishop Tutu will be welcoming through video the delegates representing over 40 countries now in Cape Town in 2 weeks. And there are now 4 ministries of peace on the planet. Solomon Islands, Nepal, Costa Rica, where President Oscar Arias in 2009 welcomed 200 delegates representing 36 countries and announced the Ministry of Justice and Peace. And on July 9th, when South Sudan became a country, and you spoke of globalization and really like taking it global, we made history as a human family on July 9th as heads of state around the world welcomed this country. The first cabinet, the first government at its beginning to have a minister of peace at that level, at the table. I mean, that gets me, does that not get you excited? That gets me excited. It's happening, and we need to tell this story to start painting the picture of it's like putting pieces of the puzzle in place. And you know when you do those giant 1,000, my mother used to love those jigsaw puzzles, and it would start out with those first 3 pieces, and I'd say, ay, ay, ay. And by the time you keep putting the pieces in, these are the first few pieces. And at the UN, there's a Peace Building Support Office. And Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State now, Hillary Clinton, just a couple of months ago, giving her major Middle East policy and encouragement speech. Maybe some of you are familiar with that if you're in international law and relations and all of that. What was the first sentence out of her mouth? It is time to push for peace. The week after, Mayor Cory Booker in Newark, do you remember when the Dalai Lama went to Newark, New Jersey, and there was that huge peace education summit? And people came from all over, but really all over the world, but certainly all over the U.S., because there are 10 states in the United States who have legislation at the state level for peace education now. I mean, imagine, 10 states, that's a lot. We need to be telling that story. Like Costa Rica as a country has it throughout the entire country, plus they have a National Peace Academy, plus they have a ministry of peace. It gets more exciting, right? There's an infrastructure of peace. So, what is it that's happening? And here is the quote that speaks to me in my lifetime. Developing the capacity to operate from the nothingness of the now, the ability to discern and take the next step in situations where old structures have broken down and new structures have not yet emerged is perhaps the most important core capacity of navigating work and life in this century. Otto Scharmer. You know U theory, I'm sure. So here are some things that are happening, and we could spend, luckily, 2 days talking about the various things that are happening on this planet right now. And I'm sure if each one of you had the chance to come up and speak, you know at least one thing that's happening, even particularly locally. Good things happening. The Ohio Dispute Resolution Commission, from 1989, they're the first ones with a longitudinal study, and they are making history from the United States by teaching elementary school children conflict resolution and peer mediation throughout the state. And let's talk about taxpayer dollars for a moment. $12 per child per year to educate our elementary children with these basic skills. Use your words. I mean, it's pretty basic. By the time they're in junior high, if that has not happened and that skill set is not there for dialogue and communication and putting your feet on the floor and being able to talk about how you're feeling and, all of that, $212 per child per taxpayer. Why? Because of the discipline problems. Art of Hosting in Columbus, Ohio, Phil Cass, a healthcare guy, and one of the founders of the Peace Academy, actually. Deep dialogue and listening. Steve showed me how to use that. A skill that is for all of us, and particularly when we talk about, because it gets a little overwhelming if we go to countries and when we go to politics. If we try to start there, if we try to start too big, it's almost overwhelming. But when we talk about dialogue and conflict resolution, as we ourselves learn to do that, gradually we become the very ones who are in the positions so that when a conflict, because we know hot spots, where there's high infant mortality rate, where people don't have a voice and they can't get their basic needs met, I'll guarantee you within 6 months to a year, some sort of violence, maybe even war, civil war is going to break out. Well, what are the conditions for peace? What are the 3 things that if they were present, then I could say, but I'll guarantee you there, with a strong civil society infrastructure where people's needs are getting met and where they do have a voice, you're going to have a right relationship in a relatively peaceful society. Ballard High School in Iowa, and I know the person to talk to afterwards if you're interested in knowing more about that, just raise your hand, please, Linda, is Linda, and you're about to see an article about that. In what paper? The Ames Tribune. And check it out. Absolutely one of the leaders in the nation. Kenya, the country Kenya, with peace councils at all levels now, because they had peace committees when they were going to the voting polls, and women started this in Kenya. And those peace committees worked so well that there wasn't the amount of violence, so now they are calling for peace councils, great infrastructure of peace throughout the country so that there is not so much violence. And ultimately, here's another possibility. I'll say, is it probable that we can make violence history? We can make violence history. The Intervale in Burlington, which is underwater right now, has inspired many Grow Food, Grow Hope programs throughout the country. And it's a great peace system. And when I met with the executive director before our intensive at Champlain College this summer, he said, it really makes me think about this as a peace system when you talk about it in terms of right relationship. Because from the farmers to the crops, to the community, to everybody sharing in that, to the CSAs, helping out the farmers and bringing the food, paying for it early, etc., to the hospitals and nursing homes and the shelters, to the composting back through. It is one great system. We need more recognition of peace systems. There is no time left for anything but to make peace work a dimension of our every waking activity. Elise Boulding would say that over and over again. And when we think of peace work as doing our own work, with ourselves, and then the work with others, and then all of us with this beautiful planet we all call home in terms of living in right relationship, again, there's hope. We can talk details. We're going to open it up for questions in about 2 minutes here. But I want to invite you to think about something for a minute. About 15 years ago, it occurred to me that of all the things, and from softball to education to playing guitar to getting to speak to doing, sometimes you just have a life like that seems a bit eclectic, but education always runs through it. But I realized that the keynote really for me, my real job, my real gift, is to inspire cooperation on behalf of the common good. Each one of us has a unique strength. Each one of us has a gift to offer to this world, and it is unlike the gift of any other. What is yours? What is the story that is being told by your behavior, by how you show up? I invite you to take just 30 seconds and strive to be really comfortable with this. It's not always a comfortable place. And go inside. Sit in your heart for a moment. Touch that place where your unique contribution, it isn't about being a banker, it isn't about being a farmer, it isn't about being a parent. It's about a quality that is your unique contribution in this world. So we'll just take 30 seconds of silence together. As you touch that place, if you can put a word or a sentence to it, you have another 30 seconds. Turn to the person next to you and just dare to give it voice. Dare to give it voice. 30 seconds and I'll call you back. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I invite you back, and I invite someone to dare to speak their contribution aloud. I invite someone to dare to speak their... It's not something we're particularly comfortable with, particularly in our Western culture. Would someone share their unique contribution? And your name, please?
I almost forgot my name. Navab is my name.
Navab.
And the thing that came to me is, I love you.
Love. It's one of the most powerful things on the planet, and it's a word like peace. It doesn't always get the credit that it deserves. Thank you for doing that. One more, and then we move on to the final piece in Q&A. One more? Compassion. Your name, sir?
Jerry Belcher.
Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. It takes a lot of courage to show up qualitatively. I invite you to try it on. He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, thing to flout, but love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. Edwin Markham. There are so many details that can be shared. There are so many research stories. And you know, the Iowa Peace Institute, that's what I started to say before when I tripped over Ohio. The Iowa Peace Institute was one of the first institutes in the United States of America. In fact, I met the mayor earlier today, who was actually the second president. Ambassador John McDonald was the first here in Iowa. You have a deep history here in Iowa of peace building, and I name it that. Peace building is only a word that's come into our vocabulary in the last 5 years or so. And at the Peace Academy, we're now coining a word called peace learning. It's happening. And some of the deepest roots are right here in Iowa. So with that, I'm happy to talk some of the research also, or whatever you want, and some of the details and more specifics. And let's start telling the story of living together in a culture of friendship, living together in a culture of peace, which means living together intentionally in right relationship. Thank you. So Claire and Nita, you are about to tell me how we're doing time-wise.
There's a microphone at the back of the room, so I invite anyone with a question.
There's a microphone at the back of the room. If anyone has a question, you can feel free to ask that question. And while anyone is thinking that they might have a question or not, Elise Boulding wrote a book called Cultures of Peace, The Hidden Side of History. For those of you who are researching and doing some work on this as well as students, a culture that promotes peaceable diversity involving constant shaping and reshaping of understandings, situations, and behaviors to sustain well-being for all. One of the things that's starting to happen in this country, and we have support from many members of the military as well, recognizing, and it's been called forth by some of the leaders in the military, we hear them talking about it, the recognition that peace, it's necessary to learn the skills of peace building, to educate ourselves as peace builders. And when you think about it, that leads us politically to institutionalize peace building, and the military is very good at peacekeeping. And as we start to institutionalize peace building, we then have political infrastructures, existent military, and some countries at this point do not have military. They're working at things a little bit differently, and dialogue and deep listening become part of the way through in terms of recognizing needs that need to be met and differences in culture. So those things are starting to happen at all kinds of levels in many countries around the world. Do we have a question? Your name, please? Your name is? It might have to be, the bottom, yeah. Press the button on the bottom and hold it. There you go.
There we go. Okay. I'm Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Because this was so helpful to me, I would like to ask if you're willing to share with this group the iceberg example of how we can see of the lens of violence versus the lens of peace.
Okay, so this is one of the things when I am invited into a university class in particular and work at this from a bit of an academic angle. And imagine a triangle. And imagine an iceberg where you can only see the tip of the iceberg, but underneath you have two other points. So this is direct violence right here. And we see it with school shootings. We see it with, all kinds of violence. I don't need to take time to say that. Under here, we have structural violence and cultural violence. So what are the structures, the political laws, the rules and regulations, the institutions that actually make it possible for our cultural norms to make direct violence okay? Because until we deal with what's below the tip of the iceberg and recognize those structures and the changes that are necessary so that the cultural norms shift, do you know the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We can keep trying to fix this, but it's not changing. So let's look at a triangle over here that has yet to be defined. And at the top here, what are we seeing? Direct peace. Can you identify those conditions? And lots of us are challenged still in this world right now to even identify what direct peace looks like. And then I will ask, what are the structures necessary in Washington, D.C., in our local policies and politics and local government that create the cultural norms that become acceptable? And one very quick example, as a softball coach in '73, when I first started coaching at the varsity level, it was not uncommon after a big win for everybody to go over to somebody's house, pop a keg, and everybody drank, and then everybody drove home. That was a cultural norm when I was growing up, I'm sure for many of you in this room. And thousands, tens of thousands of people died from drinking and driving. Then MAD came about, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Then SAD came about, Students Against Drunk Driving. Today, they are Students Against Destructive Decisions. And what started to happen is the structures started to shift. We had breathalyzer laws. And now, today, if you watch television, you will see commercials where the alcohol and liquor industries, the alcohol and automobile industries are both putting big dollars into media campaigns that show people dropping the keys into the hands of the designated driver. And what are they saying? If you're going to use our products, please use them responsibly. That's a big shift into a culture of right relationship. Those structures have shifted. The cultural norms have shifted. It is no longer acceptable, directly acceptable to drink and drive. So what are those conditions? It's a great exercise. Next question. Okay. Your name, please?
My name is Tom.
Tom? Did it go off again? You have to hold the bottom. Either. Okay.
Maybe I don't need that.
Well, your name is Tom.
Tom Moore. I'm an educator here at Ames in the public school system.
Oh, it's on now. It's on now if you want to hold it.
And I'm interested in the peace education efforts, of course, and I'd like to talk to the educator from Ballard as well. But I also have an observation, but maybe you could speak to the issue of the current social studies curriculum and how
Go ahead, just speak louder. Just
really transformed.
Mm-hmm.
We would hope it would.
Mm-hmm.
In this sense, I mean, we teach from the American Indian War, and actually the French and Indian War, to the Civil War, to the World War. To the, I'm afraid we're going to hit the Third World War before we teach anything about peaceful efforts that are in our history.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, is there an effort through the Peace Academy or
yes,
our core curriculum?
Yes. And we are not developing all of that core curriculum. We are developing some courses, but again, we are striving to serve as connective tissue. There are many curricula out there, actually, that are actually teaching peaceful nonviolence, and not just from an activism standpoint, but from the actual idea of how people have lived like that. We have not reported out that side of history. So yes, and I'm happy to have an offline conversation with you, Tom, at the close if you want some of those references. Okay, yeah. Be delighted. Yes, that is happening. Yes.
If there are no other questions, I'd like to thank you for coming and bringing your message of hope to our campus. And I invite everyone to stay for further conversation with our guest. So please join me in a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.